targeting stuff to children that they're worried about, or gambling, where it might be running. That's pretty much it. So
that's how you win this. You make it about children, because parents are buying things for their children, and then it's getting shut down so children can't play it. And children don't understand that they don't own the game that's on their shelf. And mommy and daddy have to try to explain to their kid how, well, we don't own this game, sweetie. Activision does. What? But it's here in my hand. It's on my shelf. How come I don't own it? Yeah, you try to explain that to a 10-year-old.
To expect us to re-architect a game because we're suffering financially and we have to shut it down, therefore we have to invest even more money into it to save it. I think those to me seem like the easiest arguments.
I'd say the very first point I would emphasize is that the initiative is not retroactive. It wouldn't be even if we wanted to. So we're talking about games and practices in the future. I think even if this passed,
that was the main point that that Piratesoftware hammered home that he was completely wrong on. That was literally disproven in the first sentence on the website, which is why I think he's an industry plant, because that's the point that the industry is going to harp on in order to justify killing this, is that, oh, it'll change the games that you love, like, it'll kill Fortnite, it'll kill Call of Duty, it'll kill Apex Legends, it'll kill all these games, and it wouldn't. And no one ever claimed that it would. This is just some shit that they made up. It's fear-mongering. All right. Stop Killing Games movement may not be dead just yet. Despite Piratesoftware's best attempts to assassinate it, there may still be hope. Acursed Farms has done an interview with GamersNexus yesterday, so we're going to watch that interview and see if there's any hope left for this. We're going to see what Ross thinks now that we've gotten other major creators like Moist Critical and Asmongold actually pushing back against Piratesoftware. Now that he's got some big names on the front line, maybe there's a chance. Still got a week left on his campaign to get 1 million signatures. So if anybody from the EU stumbles across this video, I will link it in the description. Please go sign that petition and help us stop killing games. Without further ado, though, here's the interview with GamersNexus with Ross of Acursed Farms.
Today we're joined by this guy.
In fact, I'm under the opinion that nothing less than an expiration date on the box or the store page or something would wake people up. See, right now it's in order to reverse engineer a server emulator. I feel like the people who do that are like Einstein's in a straitjacket trying to get themselves out to write an equation. It's just so hostile for trying to do it. But if they had all this documentation about how the networking protocols work, and that would go a long way.
Ross Scott of Acursed Farms, who's spearheading the Stop Killing Games initiative.
He's right, though. Like, even if they didn't want to do the work, just releasing the server code and the documentation would save the people who reverse engineer this stuff, like they've done for City of Heroes, like they've done for Marvel Heroes. They've done it for a ton of games in the past and made their own, community-hosted servers to keep these games alive, and they had to do it by reverse engineering the software. If you can save them the reverse engineering step, if when these games have a shelf life and you know that their servers are the devs know these servers are going to be shut down, well, I keep saying devs. I'm going to say publishers because it's their fault. The devs probably have no problem with this. It's definitely the publishers. But if they release the documentation for the server to say, okay, on this date, we'll shut our servers down and release the documentation, well, then you've saved the hardest part for the hackers. All they need to do is look at that code and build their own server. If you're telling them that it's too hard for you to do yourself or you just don't want to invest money into it, the community will happily do it. And they could do it at a much greater success rate and at a much higher speed if they're just give them the tools to do it. We're not even asking you to do the job for them. Just give the community the tools.
Initiative, which aims to protect consumers' rights to play video games even after a publisher decides to stop supporting it. The point being that once you've spent money on something, you should have some level of ownership or expectancy that you'll be able to use that thing that you bought. And Ross said in our interview and discussion today that he thinks...
I think it's the front lines.
And we agree with him. This is sort of the front lines of the enshification discussion, where the things you own are becoming less yours, and they're more prone to just disappearing at some point.
Yep, they're all living. All of these companies are living by that motto. Okay. Oh shit. Let me cancel. I saw you joined. All of these companies are living by that motto. That I can't remember what book it was in. I think it was Orwell who said it. He said, "You will own nothing, and you will be grateful." I think it was 1984, where that quote came from. Remember the dystopian future we're supposed to be trying to avoid? He was warning us about. But that's what these companies live by, is the you will own nothing and be happy. That's the attitude they want all consumers to have. And that is exactly the attitude that Piratesoftware was pushing.
Even if you've spent money on them, and in ways that are less clear than the traditional subscription service approach, where at least that's very clear what your usage lifetime is. Currently, there's a powerful movement for a direct democracy citizens initiative in the EU to make this happen, and if it gets 1 million signatures, Ross says he...
Because what people don't understand, what the difference is, and people don't understand, is they're like, well, a lot of live services don't have expiration dates and we pay for them. Like, why should games be different? Like, you pay for Netflix, you pay for Disney Plus, you pay for streaming services, and there's no... Even Game Pass, you pay for these services, these live services, and they don't tell you when they're going to shut down. But the difference is they're a subscription service. You're paying them by the month to access that service. The only thing you get with your money on Game Pass or Netflix or Disney Plus, the only thing you're guaranteed to get is 30 days of service when you pay them. That's not how these games are being sold, though. You're paying for a game that you're supposed to own, especially when it's a physical copy of the game, when it's a physical good. No other physical good works like that. If you want to do an accurate comparison, a physical good, you want to compare games to movies, then you're not comparing a game like Concord that got shut down in 11 days that you paid for. It's true they refunded that one, but that's how they should treat all of them. That you paid to buy this game off the shelf, you took it home, and 11 days later you can't play it. Imagine going to the store and buying a Blu-ray of your favorite movie, and 11 days later the Blu-ray doesn't work. You can't watch it anymore. That's not how movies on Blu-ray work. You can watch them forever. You own that movie now. You own a copy of that movie. That's how games have traditionally worked for all of their lifespan, minus the last 5 to 10 years. I own copies of games on regular Nintendo, Super Nintendo, PSP, PlayStation 2. I can put them in those systems and they still work. In fact, I can put 360 games that I own into my current day Xbox and they still work. All of their features on them still work. I still play Burnout Revenge on 360. I can still play it online. I can still access all of its features. So we're trying to get that with modern day games.
He feels pretty good about the chances.
This one, the European Citizens Initiative, I really think, I would bet money that we win it if we can get the signatures. Because, again, everything's kind of aligned for this. And for anyone who's not in the EU, USA or Canada, I think if this passed, I think it's incredibly likely you would all get the benefits downstream.
And we'll link that form below. There's also an action in...
He's right. You do get benefits from that. So they haven't banned loot boxes in the U.S. like other countries have, but not the U.S. But when they banned loot boxes stopped showing up in all games. We don't get loot boxes in games anymore. Not really. They still shovel them into sports games, but here in the U.S., sports are treated like their own fucking thing anyway, so I don't even consider them video games. They're not in the same realm. Just like gambling is illegal in the U.S. Oh, except for sports betting. You can download FanDuel and DraftKings right now and bet all you want from the comfort of your home in any state in the U.S. But all other forms of gambling are illegal in my state. But I can sports bet legally. So sports are always treated as a separate thing for some fucking god-awful reason. So
Sports betting, horse racing.
yeah, all of those sports things are considered their own thing for some stupid fucking reason. So I don't consider them video games. Like, what video games now have loot boxes? They took them out of Overwatch. They're not in Call of Duty anymore. They're not in Battlefront anymore. They're not in Fortnite. Like, what other major games have them? There's probably some that still try to do them. Arguably, I guess the gacha games, the Chinese-made gacha games that have become popular, like Genshin Impact and shit. Maybe. What are we playing right now?
I don't know. I gave you hosts and you readied up for this.
No, you were. Oh, I didn't know. I joined you and I just read it up for whatever you had queued. I'm in a vault room, counting money, apparently. Am I supposed to be going somewhere here? I feel like I'm doing Mission Impossible shit, parkour style. Mission Impossible shit. Yep. Okay, just dodge the lasers. All right. Anyway, back to this.
In the UK, that requires 100,000 signatures, also linked below for those of you in the UK. And today we're talking with Ross about the current status of Stop Killing Games, what happens next, what happens if the million signatures are achieved, and hopefully they are. It's possible right now. If enough people get involved, it actually can happen. And he also talks about why he thinks this is a potential proving ground for things like ownership of digitally made content and products and what happens next. And we'll also talk about how you can help the most effectively by speaking with Ross about what those options are. Let's get into it. This GNCA video is brought to you by us and our honeypot t-shirts for charity. The honeypot t-shirt features a custom foil design with a smashed shiny honeypot on the front, with the back featuring a GN logo with a bee flying away. Each shirt also comes with a trading card, ready to be played with its mechanics that grant treasure tokens to an opponent and then immediately take them back, including my own flavor text that I've written at the bottom. We're donating the profit from this shirt order to archive.org for its preservation of media and websites, the Cramden Institute for its e-waste recycling and its PC refurbishing and distribution programs, and the Public Interest Research Group for its support of consumer rights and warranty rights. Head over to store.gamersnexus.net to grab one today. And now we'll get straight to the interview. And remember, the links to those forms below, those are not the typical type of petition that goes nowhere and does nothing. These are actual legal processes in the UK and in the EU, and your signatures can actually help. But let's get to the discussion.
What's kind of the elevator pitch, top level, and then we'll branch into some of the technicals.
Most video games, you pay for them, bring them home, play them, and it's yours, effectively. There's rights issues, but if you bought a game, geez, I think even as far back as the 70s for like Atari or something.
Yep, you own that
If you kept the equipment in good shape, it still works, And even online multiplayer, especially like around 90s, where if you could connect to an IP address or IPX or something, if you didn't change things, they can still...
Yeah, that was my solution, was to just release software when you delist a game, when you shut down its servers. All they have to do is, on top of like releasing the code and shit, is release software that works like back in the day. Like, that's how we played online games, was through a software called GameSpy, which would basically just show you all servers publicly available for all games. You selected the game you want, and it would show you all publicly available servers, and then you could just join them. That was how we played games. If you had a multiplayer game you wanted to play, you fired up GameSpy, you filtered by that game, and it showed you all servers available for it. You could just release a software like that, and if they really wanted to get greedy, I don't want them to do this, but I'm just saying, it is an option. If they really wanted to get greedy, they could charge a subscription service for that. And then they could, they could allow creators to host servers on it, and then players pay to access those servers using their software. So then they could continue to make money without actually running servers for the game. They'll have these third-party hosts that run servers, and then consumers can pay $5 a month for the server browser. I don't want them to do that. I don't want them to monetize it, but it's an option. Just saying, if they really wanted, if it was really about money, there's still a way.
Still work, and obviously most people did change things, but there's all sorts of support for that from the community. But so the industry has been kind of normalizing where you buy the game the same way as previous ones, you keep it, and then just at an undisclosed time period, they turn the server off, and because you have to connect to the publisher, the game's bricked. You can never run it again, and they keep your money though. So it's not like a service where, well, a few games are, like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV, where they tell you exactly when your access ends. You know, you pay for a month or pay for 6 months. Okay, and that's kind of, I want to say until about 2004, pretty much every single video game made was one of those two categories. Either you're told how long it lasts, or you get to keep it and run it indefinitely. And this practice where they take away the ownership, or effective ownership, I guess, it's driven me up the wall, because that's led to more games effectively destroyed that you can never run again than any other practice. I mean, there's all sorts of obscure, games for, Commodore, or mentioned Atari, that we've managed to preserve them one way or another. But meanwhile, there's this black hole of games starting from, the mid 2000s up until now. And it's only getting worse. And the thing about this is, unfortunately in the US, this is pretty locked down legally. But in many other countries, especially the EU and Australia, this was never really tested legally. Companies just did it, and nobody really stopped them. And the laws were never really written for this kind of situation.
I think because it's about video games, it's easier for people to be dismissive of some of the concerns, especially if they're not really attached to games the same way. And I think the best kind of way I have to reframe why it's important is this is kind of an extension of you'll own nothing, and you'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. That's the phrase. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And this isn't an extension of that. This is that. They've been testing the waters and pushing this for a while. They've been slipping in you're buying a license for a game forever into games. Like, that's been there for at least 10 years, which the people like Piratesoftware who defend this stuff will be happy to point at that and go, you guys haven't owned games for years. Well, we haven't, but we have, because even though they've slipped that into the license agreement that you agree to, those have also been shot down in court before, where they're like, no, you sold them a thing, they own the thing. This has also happened in other industries, not just video games, where Apple's tried it and lost in court. That's why we got back the right to repair, because no, I do own my iPhone, even though you run the software for it and blah blah. I do still own it, and if it breaks, I have the right to repair it. Courts have given us that right. Now we're trying to get something similar to apply to video games. That something that legally recognizes the ownership. That's what this is all about. Despite what someone like Piratesoftware would tell you, that's what it's really about.
I think it's the front lines.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, a lot of lawmakers or important people in general. You're right. They don't really. Usually, the only time video games come up
I'm down.
are either whether
Violence.
Targeting stuff to children that they're worried about, or gambling. Where it might be running. That's pretty much it. So
that's how you win this. You make it about children, because parents are buying things for their children, and then it's getting shut down so children can't play it. And children don't understand that they don't own the game that's on their shelf. And mommy and daddy have to try to explain to their kid how, well, we don't own this game, sweetie. Activision does. What? But it's here in my hand. It's on my shelf. How come I don't own it? Yeah, you try to explain that to a 10-year-old.
I mean, I can understand that this does get passed over, but no, that is a theory I've heard, that this could be kind of testing grounds to see what people will tolerate. I think the best real-world example of what's happening in video games would be printers, where, you bought a printer, it works, but because the driver to connect to the server doesn't work, okay, now it's bricked, it doesn't work, even though it's...
DRM for printers.
Yeah, exactly. There's several cases of that. I think printers are the closest real-world object equivalent of what's going on.
I guess if you could briefly describe what point are you at in the process for Stop Killing Games, because this is an initiative where you're actually trying to go through the legal system to get something done.
Oh, yeah. We've done a lot of stuff where, because I tried to attack on all cylinders on this. So we did this in two basic ways. One was there was a perfect test case for this, a game called The Crew by Ubisoft, where they shut it down and it just checked off every box for this being a good case for consumer agencies to look at. And we managed to get complaints on that filed in France, Germany, and Australia. We're still waiting on a decision, which is probably a good sign, because if we had no rights on this, then they could tell us that pretty quickly. We have lots of things underway with government or that we've exhausted. The other big way that we've been doing this is trying to propose law to governments on this through government petitions, or the big one now is the European Citizens Initiative. That's kind of the crown jewel of all this, where if we can get enough signatures on that, I think we end this. Now, the two ones we have active right now are European Citizens Initiative, which are open to anyone in the EU, from any citizen of an EU country. It doesn't matter where you live, but you have to be a citizen. And the UK. Our odds are worse in the UK, but it is an option that they do have a process to bring it before Parliament.
And so these two things, so these are forms that people can sign. The EU Citizens Initiative is an actual EU process, like it's an actual legal process, and requires 1 million signatures with some sub-requirements, so there needs to be a certain amount in different given countries. Currently, you're up at around 542,000 of the 1 million or so required. When you made your video, and I guess if you captured the footage a little before that, maybe within the last week or so, your screen capture had it at 453,000, so nearing another 100,000. I guess first of all, for anyone in the audience who you care about this issue, just pause right now, and I'll have the links in the description if you're in the UK. There's a separate link if you're in the EU.
I will also put those links in the description of this video for those watching mine instead of his.
That's the one.
And you should go watch that one too. You shouldn't just watch mine. I'm not a market replacement.
Sounds like the kind of big focus is on the Citizens Initiative.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was looking into it, and there's sort of Wikipedia lists 6 cases that have kind of gone through this process. There's some really serious things on this. Right to water, which I think the name's pretty self-explanatory.
Thankfully, I don't think we're beating that. That would yeah, that's the goal. I hope not. I hope not.
That would be a different concern. How did you find out about this process? Because I don't think this was your first avenue, right? This has been going for a while now.
It was a long, winding road of researching options. We lost an entire month basically chasing down dead ends for this, where we would call agencies, or volunteers would in those countries, and then we would just, from the same agency, we would get different answers. Some would say, well, no, you signed the license agreement, they can do whatever they want. Others saying, well, no, I think that means they have to run it indefinitely. And one in Germany said there is no clear legal regulation on this. There's the ECC, the Consumer Network,
Yeah.
but
I don't even know what
it's all a blur in my head how many
Got hit in the
pages I
back.
looked at trying to. It's like doing a 400 level college research paper project or something like that. This is basically a mechanism for the citizenry to tell government, hey, we have a problem, please address this. And there's a lot of requirements to get it launched. Like you can't just put anything like everybody should have flying cars or something. That would get thrown out. And you have to include directives that show they have the authority to act on this. So you can't just say, ban UK's football team that we don't like or something. It's
The requests have to be realistic, obviously. It's a shame that they have to write that. They probably get some crazy shit, like people doing that stuff. Like, we should ban whores. What? It's not against the law to be a whore. I mean, you can. Probably won't help your love life, but you can.
You can't even get it open for signing without passing several checks, essentially.
Okay.
And if we get the signatures, then it goes to the EU Commission, and then it essentially becomes kind of a
Pass the turret.
fact-finding evaluation. I wouldn't say like a court case, but they're going to try and get information from all sides on this. So they'll hear from the industry, they'll hear from developers, hear from customers, that sort of thing. And then
it's the equivalent of like a. Don't worry, I'll respond. It's the equivalent of like a United States congressional hearing, basically.
everybody would be able to kind of say their piece, and then the EU Commission would decide, okay, what's reasonable or not. And the reason I'm so optimistic is because of that kind of hole in the law I mentioned earlier, where there just aren't clear terms on this already. So if we're coming in just asking for basic consumer rights that are in line with all kinds of other products, I think we would either win, or this would just look really bad for a lot of politicians, like a international news level that they wouldn't want.
You've somewhat, I don't know if I don't want to attribute the wrong phrase to it, but I feel like you have maybe like a half joke slide about being an easy win, easy political victory for politicians.
Yeah, because from the politician standpoint, okay, politicians like to get things passed, so they can, have a victory lap, but they don't want things that are like really controversial or going to give them a lot of heat, or in trouble with their constituency. So, I mean, if you compare this to like something like immigration policies, or maybe something popular, like unpopular, like raising taxes on something, that's not a fun one for them to engage in if they don't have to, or if they're not sure their numbers. But this, like we said earlier, a lot of government doesn't care about video games in the first place, and really a lot of their constituency might.
I don't even think it's that a lot of governments don't care about video games. I think it's just like a lot of them are so old and they just don't understand what video games are anymore. They still think that video games work the same way they have forever. They don't understand like how much the industry has changed because they just don't keep up with it. Like, I think the first step would be educating them on the fact that these games don't work like, back in the day when you had to buy your grandson a Nintendo. Things have changed this much, and you have to make them aware of it.
Might not either, and this is pro-consumer, so this could be relatively easy for politicians to pass because, I mean, it's not a free win exactly, but the winds are blowing in the right direction for it. That's the way I would put it.
So on the technical side, I guess we can get into that. Your video does a good job of talking about this recently, but I think some of the first line of defense arguments you would have against some kind of video game preservation when there are elements that require server connectivity, the first thing a developer might oppose with that is you could straw man it and say, well, we're not giving away our source code. That's our intellectual property. That's crazy. We're not going to, we close the game. But that's kind of a misconception we could talk about. Another one might be that just on a pure technical level or maybe a financial feasibility level, you could straw man it a different way and say, well, to expect us to re-architect a game because we're suffering financially and we have to shut it down, therefore we have to invest even more money into it to save it. I think those to me seem like the easiest arguments. How do you confront this?
It may not be an intentional straw man. I mean, it's easy to understand where people can get hung up on this. I'd say the very first point I would emphasize is that the initiative is not retroactive. It wouldn't be even if we wanted to. So we're talking about games and practices in the future. I think even if this passed...
That was the main point that Piratesoftware hammered home that he was completely wrong on. That was literally disproven in the first sentence on the website, which is why I think he's an industry plant, because that's the point that the industry is going to harp on in order to justify killing this, is that, it'll change the games that you love, like... it'll kill Fortnite, it'll kill Call of Duty, it'll kill Apex Legends, it'll kill all these games, and it wouldn't. And no one ever claimed that it would. This is just some shit that they made up. It's fear-mongering. They're using Piratesoftware is using all of the tactics that these businesses would use in order to, kill a bill in front of congressmen or parliament or whatever they're called in Europe. Damn it.
I think a really fast implementation would probably be 2 years minimum, but it could probably be longer than that. So, yeah,
I'd say a good 5 to 8, because it would only be applied to new games made after I would say it probably wouldn't even apply to games that are in development now. It would only apply to games that start development after this date. So your 5 to 8 years out before you start seeing those games actually start pop up and become, the norm.
That's the first thing to acknowledge is let's talk about games in the future first.
Right.
That's the first framing. The second, like you mentioned, they don't. Well, first, we would not be requiring them to give out source code
I don't think we have to kill the turret. We can just ignore it.
under any scenario. But let's say something
Oh no, wait, we do have to kill it. It won't open the door. Okay, never mind.
like server binaries or something like that. See, for a lot of games right now, if they were never designed for something like this, it could be they don't have the rights from the company that they're using the middleware from, or have some microservice connected to that. They can't legally give this out even if they wanted to because of existing deals. So for how those games would be handled, I mean, like right now, that would be in the EU Commission's hands, but I'd say the only two options, if they just can't rework it or if it's just too costly, they could shut it down before the law went into effect. So, we're talking a couple years down the line. Or it could be that during the compromise process, the EU decides, okay, this is too disruptive to just do all at once like this. We're going to grandfather in everybody who's selling games before this date. Mm-hmm. So in other words, okay, since you were selling your game before 2028 or something, you get a free ride for this game. You will not be subject to these regulations, but any games that start getting sold after that date, that's when it kicks in. And from that point, I would emphasize developers to just start focusing on it, like just from the design phase onwards. So, nothing's been written yet. You're just figuring out how you're going to code this. And it could be, a lot of things could have to change depending on the game. It could be that, again, like for middle.
Obviously something like Destiny would be the hard one because that is a game it's free now. So that's another thing. Like, how would you handle games that changed their price point after the game was released and went from paid to free to play? Like, obviously, I think you would make a carve out for free to play games that say this doesn't apply to them because you're not paying for the game anyway. So there is no purchase there for the consumer. They're purchasing things in the game that they got in the game, and then the game shuts down.
Yeah.
But you've got something like Destiny where half the player base did buy the game, and then a good portion of the player base didn't buy the game. So how do you apply this to something like Destiny, especially when that game requires constant updates and works as a live service, but was a store purchased game? So that's a weird one.
Or microservices, you might have to renegotiate with those vendors that you used to get things from, just so you have enough rights to allow an end-of-life build.
For the microservices and middleware vendors, any quick examples you could throw out there of not necessarily specific companies, but types of game systems that might use these?
I was thinking with The Crew.
Yeah.
That's a game that also used copyrighted music and name brand car licenses, which they might have said, okay, you can't sell it after this date.
Right.
And now I've never heard of a deal like that stopping the user to continue playing the game after that date.
I don't believe that's ever been a thing. There have been cases where you can't stop playing the games. Games have been delisted on Steam before because of licensing. And that's why we have a problem with people who didn't get to play those old games. That's why a lot of older Nintendo games, you can't buy digital copies of them. Nintendo can't put them on their virtual consoles and resell them because they're licensed games like Batman, etc. But if you still own a copy of it, you can still play it. You can still, a car game that's got all the cars in it, like Gran Turismo, you can still buy it. You can't still buy it. They can't still sell it, but you can still play it if you have it. So I haven't heard of one that's why The Crew is such a good example, because it's a game restricting access to its user base based on licenses expiring for cars, I believe was their reason.
That's the difference. But let's say the deal was only for the client to have that, and those car models are in the server code somewhere. Right. That deal was never made, so they can't do it. So, but in the future, if you want to make a new car game and you're negotiating with Porsche or something, then they would know that, if they want to sell this game in the EU, which has 450 million people in it, we have to allow we have to add an extra little clause that, okay, we can release server software that contains the model at end of life, even if we can't sell the game past that point.
Right.
And because it might also come up, it's entirely possible, well, for many of these games, it's maybe probable, that the server for this, there's no way it's going to be able to run on consumer hardware, like, especially for something like an MMO where it's meant to be dealing with thousands of players, that sort of thing. For a scenario like that, they would not have to adapt it to like an x86 machine or, a console or something. But what they would have to do is release some version of the server software. It could be stripped down, like maybe it cuts out stuff like, accounting.
Yeah, like for an MMO, you would have to release a version of the software that held just enough of the just enough players that would limit the player count, because obviously the more players in it, the beefier the hardware you have to run it. So yeah, consumer hardware isn't going to run an MMO server like World of Warcraft with thousands of players logged on at one time. But you could release a version of the server software that caps out the player limit at 20, for instance, 20 or 30, enough so that you and your guild members can all play together and in a mostly empty world. And then of course PvP would be just limited to you and your guild. So yeah, it would be a stripped down version of the game. Some features would be disabled, but that shouldn't matter. Like, the point of it is to keep the game playable, and you're keeping the main crux of the game playable, which is the ability to log on and play the MMO with your friends.
Information on all the accounts and stuff, and then they just disclose to customers, okay, if you want, here's the software, but it's going to require a Graviton 3 processor if you want to run this. Good luck figuring it out. You're on your own,
Yeah, go get your own AWS instance or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the goal here is it doesn't have to be easy. It has to not be impossible. That's
right.
the kind of
that. By your vision of it, do you think that the law would kind of explicitly lay out a few options for developers for how they can keep the games, quote, reasonably playable, or is it kind of up to the developer?
It's hard to say. It depends how hands-on the EU wanted to get. If I had to just guess, I would lean towards no, because that's something you mentioned earlier. I think I forgot to get to. One of the reasons we worded the initiative the way we did, we focused on the game being in a playable state. We did not say, okay, you need to include the server binaries, or you need to patch the client to allow
it was purposefully vague to give them that flexibility, which it being purposefully vague is the thing that Piratesoftware held against it by saying this isn't going to pass, it's too vague. No, that's actually playing in the favor of the developers and the publishers. By making it vague, it leaves them wiggle room to decide how they want to go forward. Those are all good things, not bad. Piratesoftware.
Private server functionality, or you need to include source code, because as soon as you do that actually could run up against existing copies.
Yeah, giving them that wiggle room gives them less of an argument against it, because they can't say, well, they're trying to make us do this, because then the judge or parliament or whoever's going to look at it can say, well, it doesn't sound like they're trying to make you do anything. It sounds like it read to me like the beginning of a negotiation, not a bill. Like, they're not trying to tell you what to do. They're trying to start a conversation on, hey, how can we handle this? It's the beginning of a conversation. None of it as written, Piratesoftware is right, none of it as written would get passed into law. But they're not trying to pass what's written into law as it stands. This is the beginning of a negotiation, not a bill. So he's completely misrepresented what this is. What's up, Trunks?
Copyright laws, because now you're telling developers they need to release this specific code, and that might have their intellectual property.
Oh, shit.
By listing the goal, a working game, something they would have already sold limited rights to just in the license agreement as it is, that allows us to kind of sidestep that, where, we're not telling them how they do this. They just need to hit that goal any way that they deem fit, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Has there been any developer engagement thus far? You named and thanked a couple.
They need to focus on publishers. They keep saying developers, and I don't think developers are going to push back on this. I think it's publishers are the ones who are going to push back. Those are the ones you need to be starting the conversation with. So they need to quit using the word developer and switch to publisher.
developers in your video early on who were positive, but what's that side been like?
Mostly radio silent,
Okay.
to be honest.
All right.
Yeah, because the publishers won't let them speak. You need to be focusing on talking to the publishers, talking to Activision, talking to Blizzard, talking to the people that publish these games, not the people that just make them. So you wouldn't be talking directly to, you wouldn't be talking directly to the developers that work on a game. You would like if it were an Activision game, you wouldn't be talking directly to like Treyarch for Call of Duty or something. You would, or Sledgehammer Games. You would be talking to, you would be talking to Activision. And with an EA game, you wouldn't be talking directly to, DICE or whoever makes Battlefield or whatever game that you're focusing on there. You would be focusing on talking directly to EA because they're the ones who control those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, I'd say there are more for the ones I've encountered. There are more for it than are against it, but there is, I'd say 20 to 30% sometimes against it. But a whole lot of that comes from them thinking, hey, we coded this game that was never intended. They think we're saying you need to change everything you did about the game and re-architect everything, right. And I think that causes kind of a knee-jerk reaction against it.
Right. And so that's, obviously the intent, as you said, is future-looking. So. Yeah. In order to really be against this, you basically would have to take the stance that it's not possible to make a game that's meant to run online only that can have an end-of-life build for the customer. And I think if you frame it that way, I think a lot of developers are going to say that's kind of silly. That's the other thing that kind of works in our favor is in the absence of legal guidelines, there's no customer standards either besides indefinitely, because the earliest one I know of that the shortest game I know of, there might be a couple that are shorter, I think was the Culling 2, which lasted 8 days on the market, then it shut down. And then the long...
Oh shit, there was a game? That was a free-to-play game though, wasn't it? I was going to say, I don't think there was a game that was sold that lasted shorter than Concord. Concord lasted 11 days. I didn't realize the Culling 2 only lasted 8 days. But that was a free-to-play game, wasn't it? So I don't think that one counts towards taking the crown of being shortest-lived game. That's more shortest-lived live service.
Longest I know of that uses this practice where you just bought it once and then get to keep it, but it's online only, is Guild Wars. And that's still going. Guild Wars 1, from...
Isn't EverQuest still going? Isn't the original EverQuest still going? Because that's a game you bought it once and... Wait, does EverQuest have a subscription? I thought EverQuest was one of those games you buy it once and you still get to play. I didn't realize that Guild Wars was still going.
If you bought that in 2005, it still works. They're still supporting it. So that's a hell of a spread to, have the...
8 days to 2 decades.
Yeah, I guess with the 8 days one, they did refund it. The shortest one I know of where there were no refunds is ironically named the Lawbreakers, which I think was about a year.
Cliffy B! That's that Cliffy B game. Remind him of that on Twitter and he'll block you. Yeah, he blocked me. Check out my Twitter. It's hilarious to watch him cry about his failed career.
Yeah,
that was Blazinski's studio, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, and that was an arena shooter.
Yeah.
You're telling me if they hadn't known this was a requirement coming, they couldn't have designed it to just have a build ready by end of life that allowed a private server?
They absolutely could. Cliffy B, his studio, has made arena shooters in the past that you can still log into today and play even after the official servers have been shut down. Unreal Tournament, for instance. Unreal Tournament 3, I know for sure. I think even the old ones like Unreal Tournament 2004, my personal favorite, I believe you can still log in and play. There are player-hosted servers for it to this day.
Connection,
even just like LAN or something.
Yeah, exactly. So 8 people can hop around and have them. I don't buy it, that you couldn't do that.
Right. What do you think at this stage? What's the momentum look like now after releasing your latest video, which was a couple days ago at the time we're recording this? Does it look positive to you? Where do you feel like things are at right now?
I think my latest video kind of cleared up a bunch of stuff, and thankfully brought in some big YouTubers to start talking about, which is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, he finally got that attention from Moist Critical, Asmongold, and stuff to get the attention it deserves, not just a minor shout out from them, but a full-blown rant and video on it, which is something they should have done a long time ago if they actually cared as much about games as they said that they do. I know that Asmon cares more about politics now, and I guess Moist Critical's doing TV shows or drama shit. I don't know.
What I've been saying is we've upgraded it from doomed to long shot.
Okay.
So, but like this, if the momentum keeps the way it is now, we've got this. But I'm used to a lot of disappointment. I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, but I would love to be wrong.
What's the date that the EU one needs to be?
July 31st.
Okay.
So end of July. That's when. That's kind of our make or break moment.
And again, if anyone watching this, if you're an EU citizen,
Well,
then
like now, yeah, it might actually
just
make it.
don't just open it now and go do it. If you
And for anyone who's not in the
Yeah, if they get the proper support, how many did he say it had now?
It went up 100,000 in the last couple days.
It needs to go up another 400,000 in the next 5 days. It's possible, but it's still, like he said, it's been upgraded from Doom to
July
Long Shot.
31st.
Oh, the 31st? I thought it was closer than that.
That's what they said.
Oh, okay. So it's got a month. Yeah. He said it's been upgraded from Doomed to Long Shot. So he's right. It's got a chance now. So we need more big creators like that to actually just like keep putting attention on it and keep doing that call to action. Because if you can get Moist Critical and Asmon's audience in on it, you can counteract the damage that Piratesoftware's done, which I still believe was intentional.
EU, like USA or Canada. I think if this passed, I think it's incredibly likely you would all get the benefits downstream, because if these companies know, okay, we need to have an end-of-life build if we're going to sell our game in the EU, well, once they drop support, if they're already releasing it there anyway, they may as well release it globally because the work has already been done on it. Like, the analogy I make to this is...
Yeah, it would be more work. So if their complaint is work, it would then count against them if they get this to pass in the EU and then they make separate versions for Australia, America, Canada, and all the other countries, then it would be more work to make those separate versions that don't comply than to just release the one that does comply globally. So they'd actually be shooting themselves in the foot if they lose this in Europe and then have to fight it again in the United States and Australia, etc., with the argument that it's too much work. And then they go, well, actually, it seems like you guys are putting more work into not doing it. Yeah, so that would work against them.
Several years back, Australia sued Valve over not allowing refunds on digital games. Valve lost, so afterwards, rather than just allowing Australians to have refunds, they just made that the policy globally because they decided it just wasn't worth it going through this country by country on it, and just to bite the bullet and just get it over with.
Yeah,
I think it would be very similar to that.
That's where they brought in that, I don't know what it is today, but at the time it was if you had played under 2 hours, you could get a refund.
Yeah, it's still the same. If you play a Steam game for under 2 hours, you can still get a refund, no questions asked. Yep, and that's all because of Australia. So it's not like they said, well, we're going to fight in the United States and not do refunds. Nope, they just said, okay, well, we'll just make that a global change. And then they found the least amount of time that they could make a game playable so that they could do refunds, because now they have to do refunds for the whole world. So they found the least amount of time possible that you can play a game that Australia would still accept and just made that the global, which is good. We all benefited from Australia's victory instead of just the Australians.
Refund or something like that. No, that's a really good example. Yeah, I think also, even if the publisher doesn't want to make it available readily for the US market or wherever else, I would think chances are if there's something released for the EU market, it'll kind of work its way out, like where...
Yeah, I'm thinking of the Jurassic Park quote of life finds a way. Yeah.
Yeah, it would find its way through. So if this Citizens Initiative goes through, what would be the next... If you get the 1 million signatures, what's the next thing that happens?
The next thing that happens is the organizers, the official ones. Yeah, I'm actually not eligible to be an official part of this, even though I've been promoting the hell out of it. The organizers are actual EU citizens. They would go to Brussels and then discuss it with the EU Commission. That could go a couple different ways. It could be that the EU Commission understands what we want and they just ask for minimal feedback, or it could be they're there every other day answering questions and hashing this out. A lot is in the EU Commission's court at that point.
Okay. And then what about the form that you have for sign up for the UK? What is that one?
Okay, the UK, I'll try to do this one quickly. This one's been a bigger mess than any other because we initially launched this last year, and in the middle of it, Parliament got dissolved, which means the whole thing closed early. But before that happened, we got an answer back that didn't really address the problem. Like they were saying no, but they were giving all these reasons that were unrelated. So it's like they didn't get it. And that ended up being so bad, the petition committee actually sent a letter back to the it was culture, I forget the department of Culture, Media, something like that, back to them saying this answer isn't sufficient, can you please try again, which apparently is really rare for that to happen. So it's so bad, it got the petition committee involved, and then everything shut down. So then many months passed while it got reassembled again, and then once it reopened, we submitted the petition again, and then we got that almost the exact same answer back, except this time I think it's just one guy in the department who's answering this, and he's just like copying and pasting his previous answer. You know, it's like somebody copying somebody else's homework.
My previous email, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm just gonna photocopy this, rearrange it, and that, bam, I'm done. I'm going to lunch. I think really.
You got ChatGPT to do it.
I think that's what's going on. So the only way around that is for us to get more signatures, 100,000. I think we're at 30,000 about right now for that. And then that will leapfrog over it entirely and go straight to Parliament. Okay. And then Parliament gets to decide. They will debate this or discuss if they want to debate this, but that'll give us a final answer or not, whether it has a chance. There actually is some provision. Yeah, if we wanted to cause a lot of problems, we could actually hit them in different ways for the UK government, because in their law, the fact that you're not told when the game is going to shut down could actually really run afoul of some things. But we've only been pursuing routes that lead to, or potentially lead to, the games being saved, because they have to have secured some way. If all that happened was that they put a label saying the game will be supported at least 2 years, I haven't even been pursuing that, because my only goal is just to save the games, not to get, like, you know, nibbling around the edges consumer information.
I mean, that might be what you have to do, though. It may be easier to get something passed doing around the edges and not getting games saved permanently. But, you know, if we can save this part of it, then we got an argument for the next part. Yeah, it may have to be done in steps.
Right.
Stuff.
Yeah, I also think that would be the first thing that, if pressed, publisher would be willing to give up. Is like, okay, well, we can calculate the cost of keeping some Amazon web server online, even if the company's like dissolved, and and so, okay, we'll support it for 2 years minimum. And then the other problem too is, if you stick a label like that on every game that comes out, it just becomes normalized where it means nothing anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, I'm under the opinion that nothing less than an expiration date on the box or the store page or something would wake people up. I think anything else, they would just want to...
Yeah, because you have to do something to communicate it to the average everyday buyer who's not online, who's not watching these influencers, who's not watching these streamers, who's not reading the laws, who's not reading Reddit, who's not doing all of those things. The average everyday consumer who's just picking up the box in the store and buying it. You need something, like, at the bare minimum, you have to make it so that there's something on the box that they're required to put to inform the customer of what they're buying.
Really think about it, just... And to be honest,
not in a user agreement, not in some crap that they're not going to read on the console itself, but on the box, on the store shelf, something that's visible before they spend their money on it. I'm going to crawl out of the room.
kind of feel like they shouldn't have to. I mean, if you want to go watch a movie, you don't check the specs as to whether it's going to shut down halfway through the feature. You know, you just want to have fun, you know, and have a good time. And I kind of feel like that responsibility shouldn't be on the customer, that it's going to get destroyed unless they check all this stuff with the DRM and how long the support is and everything. So.
Our this is maybe more pointed towards kind of the mainstream, which wouldn't necessarily be our audience. I think people here understand why games are important to them, but are games art?
I don't care. Whatever, people. What I've been doing is saying.
That's the right attitude. Avoid that part of the argument because that reclassifies games. Yeah, fuck all that. It doesn't matter if games are art or not. What matters is that they're a product that consumer buys, so you need to focus on the fact that they're a product and that people are paying for a product and companies are taking that product away from them.
Like if somebody says authoritatively, no, they're never an art, I'm like, okay, I don't care. I still like them, you know. But I've been saying creative works is what I've been trying to do to kind of get around that conversation. So you can be in either camp. That's fine by me. Whether they're not art or yes, they're the highest art, whatever.
I like it. Yeah. Any misconceptions you want to go through after your newest video? I mean, you already spent a lot of time in that video talking about misconceptions, and it was done really well, but is there anything kind of new that's come up you want to talk about?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, the number one misconception we always get is that we're asking for endless support. No, we're not. They can end the game anytime they want, like the support. We're asking for end-of-life plans so that, you know, it's not impossible to run the game.
Yeah, there would be no official support at end of life. You just want a way that the customers can support it themselves, either through community servers or something. Like, you don't need endless official support from these devs, because that's what they're going to argue, is they want us to keep investing in a game after it's no longer profitable for us to do so. That's going to be their argument. And yeah, he's smart to shoot that down early, to make that very clear.
I guess not a misconception, but another possible compromise that might emerge in the EU that we were on the fence for including in the initiative itself would be, say, okay, we're not going to give you a working game, but at end of life, we're going to give you the equivalent of repair instructions.
Okay.
So they might release, you know, documentation on the networking structure.
Which is good. You're piggybacking off the right to repair, which is where Louis Rossmann could come in, and basically saying that if you can't run the game, then we'll provide you with instructions to fix this game so you can continue to play it, to fix it and put it into a playable state yourself. We're basically giving you the right to repair the game that we broke by shutting the server down.
Or, you know, decrypt the packets and that sort of thing. Whatever they can kind of, basically to give tech-savvy users a fighting chance of making a server emulator. That's where source code might come in as like an alternative. Of course we'd be happy for source code, but we're not insisting on it anywhere, because there can be a lot of reasons people don't want to, at least that. But if it got compromised down to that, I still think that would be very good, because again, it's like where there's a will, there's a way. See, right now it's in order to reverse engineer a server emulator. I mean, I feel like the people who do that are like Einstein's in a straitjacket trying to get themselves out to write an equation. I mean, it's just so hostile for trying to do it. But if they had all this documentation about how the networking protocols work, and you know, maybe some code to help them along, then I think that would go a long way and could be about as good.
I mean, it's an interesting intersection too, because so on the physical hardware side, some of the stuff you just said, talking about like a repair manual, reminds me of some of the right to repair arguments, and that has been, like, I don't think it's as successful as you know, Louis Rossmann, who's kind of spearheading a lot of that in the U.S. I don't think it's like exactly where he wants it to be, but
yeah, no one knows right to repair better than Louis Rossmann. He was one of the guys who helped spearhead that campaign against Apple and actually got it through. So if you're going to rely on anybody in the U.S. to help you out, getting him involved, especially in a topic that he's already won against once, it's a good route to take.
It's fairly successful considering people are now talking about it, and all 50 states have introduced some kind of bill. But that I've got that kind of reminder of, okay, if you're not gonna actively enable people to repair it, while it's being sold and, whatever, you still have to have some kind of option where it's not illegal to try and repair it, even if you're not actively supporting them.
Though we kind of need more than that for games,
Right.
because for a lot of repair things, maybe that is all you need, because the repair shops know how this stuff works and they can hack through it. This is one where, if you don't have that code, I mean, it's kind of like saying, yeah, you're free to make your own nuclear reactor if you want, or like the level of knowledge, work. I mean, see, even the people who really know what they're doing, it can usually take them years sometimes to do this stuff when it does happen. I'm always amazed.
Yeah, we're just now getting working playable servers for City of Heroes. And when did that game shut down? What was it, like 15 years ago? I mean, it was a while ago. And we're just now getting the, community servers for that game to be born again.
Amazed when people come up with server emulators.
And they still haven't figured out how to handle stuff like the microtransactions from the shop or how to access all the content in the game. It's still not 100% playable now.
Without having code or, some really good references for how to do it. So that was a problem we faced in the USA that we looked at originally, is that best case scenario under existing law, it would only be a defensive measure where, okay, fine, you can go make a server emulator for, let's pick Concord or something.
Right.
It's like, yeah, good luck doing that. I mean, so that's why it really has to have some intervention on this point.
Yeah, it sounds like it's basically like we won't pursue you for something you can't do anyway. Like it doesn't really
Exactly.
Right. Okay. I guess on that, as one of the maybe sort of final points we get into here, but for people in the U.S., I think something like 30 to 38% of people who watch our stuff are in the U.S. Is there anything that they should be or can be doing right now?
It's very counterintuitive, and I'm in the same camp because most of my audience is from the U.S. It's kind of a "Help me, Obi-Wan, you're our only hope" with the EU. Okay. I mean, there's some other stuff too, but for the initiative, it's the U.S. scenario. It's not technically impossible, but every lawyer I've talked to says that nothing less than an act of Congress is going to fix this. So yes, if you do know a multimillionaire who wants to start lobbying Congress, yeah, that is I'm not.
Why are we petitioning Elon Musk? I thought that he loved video games, always bragging about how good he is at Diablo and Path of Exile, and he's supposed to be pro-consumer. Why aren't we? Maybe that's the right goal. Get the attention of Elon Musk. And he's mad at Trump, so he's willing to do things that'll, get under Trump's skin, I guess. It's possible. I'd say he's a possibility.
Yeah.
That one. I'm not. This is hard enough on me already with that. But yeah. See, my goals are like, let's report this to an agency. Let's try to get lots of people to sign something. That feels more achievable to me.
Right.
But like I said, just try to. If you do know anyone who has like an EU audience or something like that, again, it's counterintuitive and kind of frustrating because you can't act directly. You have to. It's this round of.
Kai Cenat, isn't he a large EU streamer? Like, you guys need to be focusing on these people.
About way of doing it. I think that's our best shot because, again, I really think the U.S. and most of the world will get the benefits downstream.
Right.
From it.
Yeah, I agree. I'll put it on Der Bauer's radar. He's a German hardware reviewer.
Oh yeah.
I need to be focusing on the influencers who just play games, not the people who are in this space, because your goal should be maximum reach. Even if the person you're reaching out to is only like a video game player who sometimes, even if it's an influencer who sometimes plays game, or hell, I'd say an influencer who doesn't play games at all, who's just sympathetic to your cause. As long as their audience is big enough, you should be reaching out to them and getting their attention. And I think if you're going for the EU market, isn't Kai Cenat like huge in the EU? Isn't he an EU streamer? I don't even know if he plays video games or not, but I'd say fuck it, go for him anyway. Like, there's a good chance a large percentage of his audience will care. So
I know him from the 12-volt high power connector.
Yeah. I'll give him a call and see if we can get it on his radar. But Anything else you want to go over here, or anything that we've missed?
I really think this is our best shot at this. I guess the other thing is, all these decisions, all this other action we did, that's kind of underway in the government agencies. Or I give all of that stuff coin toss odds. I really have no idea how it's going to play out. This one, the European Citizens Initiative, I really think I would bet money that we win it if we can get the signatures, because again, everything's kind of aligned for this to have reasonable things. And if this passes, I mean, that's how many games in the future are you saving? Because I think hundreds, just the longer you go on. I think it was an article from last year that said 95% of major studios are involved with making some sort of live service game. And the thing is, live service does not have to be synonymous with you can never play it again later.
Right.
It's just that the industry hasn't had to do anything about it, so they don't.
Right. Yeah. And also, like you've said, there's the key phrasing being reasonable or reasonably playable state, where
Yeah, he's not even saying make it 100% playable. It's reasonably playable.
you
Yeah.
lose some things, but
I think people get lost in the wording, especially listening to people like Piratesoftware, where he glosses over those key words and then tries to represent it as something else, and the people in his audience who just heard that word said weren't paying attention to it. Like, I think it needs to be like harped on and like really, really focused on.
Yeah, like matchmaking, or
Right.
say they did have admins with a managed economy or something, stuff that's not going to be practical to keep running. Some people criticize that for it being too broad, but that's really the best route to go.
Yeah, it's too broad by design so that there's wiggle room for how the devs want to handle it.
For how these initiatives work is to keep it simple. Believe me, the EU Commission will drill into all the details and figure out what makes sense. We're just trying to get our foot in the door on this.
yeah.
So
I guess for people watching, it sounds like the calls to action are if you can sign it, the EU Citizens Initiative, European Citizens Initiative, which I'll link below. There's the one in the UK, and we'll link that as well. Requires fewer signatures, but I guess the challenge is that they're all in one.
they all have to be UK residents or citizens.
Right. And then for additional information, you've got your own videos on Acursed Farms.
If you have lots of questions, like real specific stuff, I did one video, giant FAQ, talking about the initiative, where I answered almost 40 questions and it's timestamped, so you can just jump to which one. I'd say there's a 95% chance I answered whatever your question is in that video.
Is your plan to get back to the video game content?
Oh God, yes. I never wanted to do this. It just drove me insane that seeing him destroyed and the problem getting worse. Look, after July,
You're doing the Lord's work, son.
I'm done. I mean,
You're doing the Lord's work, son. We appreciate your service.
Yeah.
I've done everything I could have on this, so I totally want to get back to. Most of my channel is just kind of fun, game-related comedy stuff or weird videos, and
Right.
100% want to get back to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anyone can blame you at this point. You've it's
I feel like I drew the short straw. Is how it feels. So.
well, we're back to the help us Obi-Wan, you're our only hope, and it's
Yeah, well,
at this point viewers.
that's most of what the last video said, is that if you're just depending on me, then you're in trouble.
Right.
I need more help on this.
All right. Hopefully the message gets out. I appreciate all the time, and then we'll link everything below for people. So thanks for joining.
I'm glad he gave him this interview. I'm a little upset that he didn't do it on his main channel, that it's on this secondary channel that most people probably aren't going to see. But, I mean, yeah, that's important. All of this stuff is important. Like, yeah, you probably do just want to get back to the fun part of gaming content. I'm sure you do. But when it's time to step up to the plate and make a difference, like, you do what you got to do. If you've got some kind of influence and you want to help, then you can't just be the guy who like wants to support it but doesn't want to actually put the work in, which I feel is a lot of creators. Is they'll mention it and go, yeah, I support that, and then like never actually like do anything to fight for it. And if you're not willing to fight for it, then you're never going to get it. And if you think that people deserve this and it's a fight worth fighting, then put your money where your mouth is, especially if you're a big creator like Moist Critical or Asmongold, then put your money where your mouth is and be part of the fight. Don't mention that there's a fight happening. Be the change that you want to see. Oh, fuck.